A routine traffic stop shouldn't end with a decorated military commander face down on the asphalt. But when a power-hungry patrolman decided to make an example out of a quiet, sharply dressed black man driving a high-end classic car, he didn't realize he was unpinning a live grenade. By noon, the humiliating footage would ignite the internet. By dusk, the highest levels of the Pentagon would be involved. And before midnight, that officer's entire professional life would be systematically, permanently dismantled. The morning sun hung low over the affluent, manicured suburban enclave of Oak Ridge, casting long golden shadows across streets lined with centuries-old oak trees. For Colonel Noah Henderson, the Tuesday morning was supposed to be a rare moment of peace. At 52, Noah possessed the quiet, commanding presence of a man who had spent 3 decades navigating the high-stakes pressure cooker environments of the United States Air Force. He had overseen global logistics during active conflicts, commanded thousands of airmen, and briefed Joint Chiefs. But today he wasn't Colonel Henderson. He was just Noah. He was dressed comfortably in a pressed navy polo shirt and tan slacks, enjoying his final week of leave before transferring to a highly sensitive command post in Washington, D.C. His hands calloused but steady rested comfortably on the worn leather steering wheel of his pride and joy, a fully restored, immaculately detailed 1968 Ford Mustang Fastback. The deep, throaty rumble of the V8 engine was a soothing soundtrack as he cruised exactly 2 miles under the speed limit down Elmwood Avenue, heading toward a local hardware store to pick up supplies for a weekend project. 2 blocks behind him, idling in the parking lot of a closed strip mall, sat Oak Ridge Police Cruiser 42. Inside the cruiser, Officer Gary Treadwell was fighting off the boredom of a slow shift. Treadwell was a man whose sense of authority vastly outpaced his actual accomplishments. 8 years on the force had earned him a reputation among his peers, not for bravery or investigative brilliance, but for a volatile temper and a desperate need to dominate every room he walked into. Beside him sat Kevin Miller, a rookie just 3 months out of the academy, who was already learning that riding with Treadwell meant walking on eggshells. Treadwell's eyes locked onto the gleaming black Mustang as it rolled past the intersection. He sat up straighter, adjusting his sunglasses. His gaze drifted from the pristine chrome bumpers to the driver behind the wheel. "Look at this," Treadwell muttered, a sneer curling the corner of his mouth. He put the cruiser in drive. "Classic muscle car in this neighborhood. Driver doesn't look local." Miller blinked, looking at the departing taillights. He wasn't speeding, was he? Looked like he was cruising. He rolled that stop sign back there. Treadwell lied smoothly, his foot pressing down on the accelerator. I didn't see him roll it." Miller hesitated. "You need to pay better attention, rookie." Treadwell snapped, flipping the switch for the light bar. The red and blue strobes violently shattered the quiet morning. A short, aggressive burst of the siren followed. Ahead of them, Noah saw the lights in his rearview mirror. A sigh escaped his lips. He hadn't committed a traffic violation. His military precision extended to his driving habits. But he knew the unwritten rules of being a black man driving a head-turning vehicle in a predominantly white, wealthy suburb. Experience had taught him that compliance and calmness were the only shields against the unpredictable nature of an armed stranger. Noah activated his right turn signal, smoothly maneuvering the Mustang to the shoulder of the road, parking perfectly parallel to the curb. He turned off the engine, plunging the cabin into silence. He rolled down both windows, placed the keys on the dashboard where they were clearly visible, and rested both of his hands firmly at 12 o'clock on the steering wheel. He took a slow, measured breath, shifting his mindset from civilian relaxation to tactical de-escalation. In the rearview mirror, Noah watched Treadwell step out of the cruiser. The officer's posture was instantly aggressive. His shoulders were squared, his hand resting casually but purposefully on the butt of his sidearm. He took a wide stance as he approached the vehicle, an intimidation tactic Noah recognized immediately from basic security forces training. Miller followed a few paces behind, looking nervous, his eyes darting around the empty suburban street. Treadwell stopped just behind the driver's side door, intentionally positioning himself in Noah's blind spot, so Noah would have to turn awkwardly to look at him. "Keep your hands on the wheel," Treadwell barked, leaning in slightly, his face completely devoid of professional courtesy. "My hands are on the wheel, officer." Noah replied, his voice deep, calm, and resonant. It was a voice that had commanded attention in war rooms devoid of fear, but brimming with a natural, unshakable authority. Treadwell didn't like the tone. He expected subservience, fear, or anger. Calmness felt like a challenge. "License, registration, and proof of insurance. Now." "They are in my wallet, which is in my back right pocket, and the registration is in the glove compartment," Noah stated clearly, maintaining his gaze straight ahead. "I'm going to reach for my wallet first. Is that acceptable?" "Just get the damn license, buddy, and stop making a production out of it," Treadwell scoffed, shining his high-powered flashlight into the car, despite it being a bright, sunny morning. The beam swept over the pristine interior, over Noah's face, and lingered on the back seat. "Whose car is this?" Noah slowly reached back, extracted his wallet, and pulled out his driver's license. He handed it through the window. "It is my vehicle, officer." Treadwell snatched the card, looking from the license to Noah. "Henderson, you live 2 towns over. What are you doing in Oak Ridge?" "I'm running an errand at the hardware store on Main Street," Noah replied. "May I ask why I was pulled over?" "You failed to come to a complete stop at the intersection of Maple and Elmwood," Treadwell said, leaning closer, his jaw tight. "And you're acting pretty defensive for a guy just running an errand. You got any weapons in the vehicle? Any drugs?" "No to both," Noah said calmly. "And I have dashcam footage that will confirm I came to a complete 3-second stop at that intersection." The mention of a dashcam caused a momentary twitch in Treadwell's jaw. His authority had been questioned, his fabricated pretext challenged with evidence. The flush of anger crept up his neck. He wasn't about to be outsmarted by someone he had already deemed beneath him. "Step out of the vehicle," Treadwell ordered, his voice dropping to a dangerous growl. "Officer, I have provided my license. I am happy to provide the registration. There is no legal justification to ask me to exit the vehicle for a simple traffic citation." Noah said, his voice remaining remarkably steady. He knew his rights, but more importantly, he recognized the dangerous escalation happening in Treadwell's eyes. "I said step out of the damn car!" Treadwell shouted, stepping back and unsnapping the retention strap on his holster. The loud click echoed off the quiet street. Behind Treadwell, Rookie Miller's eyes went wide. "Gary," he whispered, taking a half step forward. Noah saw the hand on the gun. In a fraction of a second, the veteran commander calculated the odds. A fragile ego with a badge and a gun was a lethal combination. His life was worth more than his pride in this immediate moment. "I am complying," Noah announced loudly and clearly. "I am unbuckling my seatbelt. I am opening the door." He moved with deliberate slowness, pushing the heavy door open and stepping out onto the asphalt. He stood to his full height of 6'2". Even in civilian clothes, his posture was military perfect, back straight, shoulders back. He towered over Treadwell by a good 3 inches. Treadwell hated it. "Turn around and put your hands on the roof of the car," he barked, spit flying from his lips. "Officer, this is an unlawful escalation," Noah said quietly. "Do it or I'm putting you on the ground," Treadwell roared, grabbing Noah's left shoulder and aggressively shoving him toward the Mustang. The metal of the Mustang was already warm from the morning sun. Noah placed his hands flat on the roof, feeling a sharp flare of indignation as Treadwell's rough handling dragged a metal button on his uniform across the pristine, custom-painted roof of the car, leaving a faint, audible scratch. "Spread your legs," Treadwell commanded, kicking the inside of Noah's left ankle hard enough to bruise. Noah gritted his teeth, complying. He closed his eyes, engaging the mental discipline he had cultivated over decades. Breathe, observe, remember every detail. He was no longer a citizen enduring a traffic stop. He was an intelligence officer, gathering data on a hostile actor. Treadwell patted him down with unnecessary force, his hands slamming into Noah's ribs, his pockets, his legs. "You got a smart mouth on you, Henderson. Let's see how smart you are when you're sitting in lockup. On what charge?" Noah asked, his voice still low and measured. "Failure to comply with a lawful order. Resisting arrest." Treadwell fired back, automatically pulling his handcuffs from his belt. "I have complied with every order," Noah stated. "Shut up!" Treadwell grabbed Noah's left wrist, wrenching it backward with a sharp, violent pull that strained the rotator cuff and snapped the cold steel bracelet onto his wrist. He ratcheted it down, painfully tight metal, biting into skin. He then grabbed the right wrist, doing the same, securing Noah's hands behind his back. Across the street, the bell above the door of a small boutique bakery chimed. Sarah Jenkins, a 30-something business owner who had been setting up her storefront for the morning, stepped outside, drawn by the shouting. She stopped in her tracks, her eyes widening at the scene. An older, impeccably dressed black man was being aggressively manhandled by an officer who looked completely unhinged. Sarah's instincts kicked in. She pulled her smartphone from her apron pocket, hit the camera icon, and started recording. Treadwell noticed the movement out of the corner of his eye. He spun around, pointing a finger at Sarah. "Hey, put the phone away and get back inside. This is an active police situation." Sarah stood her ground, her hands shaking slightly, but she kept the camera lens squarely focused on Treadwell. "I'm on a public sidewalk, officer. I have the right to record. You're interfering with police business, I'll arrest you too." Treadwell threatened, taking a step toward her. "Officer Treadwell." Noah's voice cut through the air, resonant and authoritative, instantly pulling the cop's attention back. "Leave the bystander alone. I am the one you have in custody." Treadwell whipped back around his face, purple with rage. "You don't give orders here, boy." The word slipped out, laced with decades of systemic venom, heavy and undeniable. Rookie Miller flinched visibly. He took a step back, suddenly realizing the terrifying magnitude of what his training officer was doing, but paralyzed by the thin blue line that demanded his silence. Treadwell turned his attention back to Noah, reaching into the front pocket of Noah's slacks and yanking out his wallet. He flipped it open clumsily, rifling through the cards. They spilled onto the hood of the Mustang, a platinum credit card, a driver's license, and finally, a thick, white plastic card with a magnetic strip, a barcode, and an embedded microchip, a United States Department of Defense Common Access card. The card clearly displayed Noah's photo, an eagle insignia, and the bold letters, Henderson, Noah M. Colonel, USAF. Treadwell picked it up, squinting at it. For a fraction of a second, confusion flashed across his face. Then his ego overrode his common sense. He scoffed, tossing the military ID onto the hood of the car alongside the credit cards. "What is this, some kind of fake badge you bought online to get out of tickets?" Treadwell laughed, a cruel, harsh sound. "Colonel Wright, and I'm a 4-star general. That is a federal government identification card, officer," Noah said, his tone dropping to an icy chill. "I strongly suggest you look at it carefully." "I don't give a damn what it is," Treadwell sneered, leaning in so close Noah could smell the stale coffee on his breath. "Out here, I'm the commanding officer, and you're going to jail." Treadwell grabbed Noah by the bicep, yanking him away from the Mustang. He marched him toward the cruiser, intentionally pushing him off balance, so Noah stumbled awkwardly over the curb. "Watch your head," Treadwell mocked as he shoved Noah into the back of the cruiser. He didn't guide Noah's head down. The top of Noah's skull cracked against the doorframe, a dull thud that made Sarah Jenkins gasp aloud across the street. Noah absorbed the blow, falling sideways into the hard plastic seat of the patrol car. He righted himself, feeling a trickle of warmth at his hairline, but his expression remained a mask of granite. He stared straight ahead through the wire mesh divider. Treadwell slammed the door shut, turning to face Sarah one last time. "You post that video and I'll find you," he threatened, jabbing a finger in her direction before storming around to the driver's seat. Miller scrambled into the passenger side, his face pale. "Gary, did you see that ID? I think that might have been real." "It's a fake, Kev. These guys buy them at surplus stores." Treadwell grunted, shifting the car into gear. "He's just another arrogant punk who thinks he doesn't have to follow the rules. I'm going to teach him a lesson about respect." As the cruiser pulled away, Noah sat in the stifling heat of the back seat. His wrists throbbed, his shoulders ached, and his head pulsed where it had struck the doorframe. But underneath the physical discomfort, a cold, methodical anger was crystallizing. Officer Treadwell had wanted a spectacle. He had wanted to humiliate a man to feed his own hollow ego. He wants a spectacle, Noah thought, the engine of the cruiser whining as they accelerated toward the station. He has no idea what kind of spectacle he just ordered. The Oak Ridge Police Department was a brick fortress built in the 1970s, smelling perpetually of ammonia, old sweat, and burnt coffee. Treadwell marched Noah through the back doors, past a half-dozen officers doing paperwork or chatting by the vending machines. A few heads turned. It wasn't every day Treadwell brought someone in who looked like a CEO on his day off, complete with blood trickling down his forehead. "Got a live one today." Treadwell bragged to a passing detective, violently shoving Noah toward the booking desk, resisting failure to comply and carrying forged federal documents. Behind the high booking desk sat Sergeant Harrison, a 30-year veteran with a graying mustache and a deep weariness in his eyes. He was 2 years from a pension and had zero tolerance for Treadwell's particular brand of macho theatrics. Harrison looked up over his reading glasses. He took in the sight of the tall, dignified black man in handcuffs, noting the ramrod straight posture, the quiet intensity in the man's eyes, and the blood on his forehead. Then he looked at Treadwell, who was looking exceptionally smug. "What happened to his head, Gary?" Harrison asked, his voice gravelly. He was uncooperative getting into the cruiser. "Slipped." Treadwell lied without blinking. "I need him booked. Dump his pockets, Miller." Rookie Miller, looking like he wanted to be anywhere else on Earth, stepped forward and emptied the evidence bag he had used to scoop up Noah's belongings from the hood of the Mustang. He placed the wallet, the keys, and the IDs on the counter. Harrison reached out and picked up the Department of Defense CAC card. He adjusted his glasses, squinting at the microchip, the holographic overlay, and the intricate barcode. He flipped it over, checking the magnetic strip and the federal warning printed on the back. Harrison had served in the Army Reserves in his 20s. He knew what a fake ID looked like. This wasn't a fake. Harrison's stomach did a sudden, uncomfortable drop. He looked from the card to the man in the handcuffs. "Name?" Harrison asked, his tone suddenly devoid of the usual bureaucratic boredom. "Noah M. Henderson," Noah replied clearly. "Address?" Noah provided his address. Harrison turned to his computer terminal. He bypassed the local municipal database and logged into the NCIC National Crime Information Center Federal Database Interface. He typed in the name and the DOD number on the card. The system took 3 seconds to process. Then the screen didn't just return a profile, it flashed a bold red-bordered security protocol. Clearance top secret, /sensitive compartmented information, /, SCI. Status active duty. Commanding officer. Flag any detention of this individual requires immediate notification to the Department of Defense Liaison Office. Harrison stopped breathing for a fraction of a second. He read the screen again to make sure his aging eyes weren't playing tricks on him. They weren't. Treadwell hadn't just arrested a military officer, he had arrested a high-ranking commander with top-secret clearance, an act that bordered on a federal incident. Harrison slowly looked up at Treadwell, who was leaning against the counter, chewing gum loudly. "Gary," Harrison said, his voice deadly quiet. "Are you absolutely out of your mind?" "What?" Treadwell scoffed. "Don't tell me you're buying that fake ID nonsense." "It's not a fake, you idiot," Harrison hissed, leaning over the counter. "He's an active-duty Air Force colonel. Do you know the kind of paperwork that's about to bury this precinct? Take the cuffs off him? Now." "I'm not taking the cuffs off," Treadwell shot back, his voice rising, drawing the attention of the squad room. He resisted. He caught an attitude. "I don't care if he's the ghost of George Washington. He broke the law in my town." "Officer Treadwell." Noah interjected his voice, cutting through the rising argument like a scalpel. "I am legally entitled to a telephone call." Treadwell spun around, pointing a finger in Noah's face. "You'll get your call when I'm good and ready to let you have it. You can call whatever cheap public defender you want." "Gary, give him the phone," Harrison ordered, stepping out from behind the desk. "Right now, that's an order." Treadwell glared at the sergeant, his chest heaving, realizing he was losing control of his own arrest. He snatched the receiver off the wall-mounted phone next to the booking desk and practically threw it at Noah. "Make it quick." Noah didn't rub his wrists, though they were bruised and bleeding slightly from the tight metal. He didn't ask for medical attention for his head. He picked up the receiver with a steady hand. He didn't dial a lawyer. He didn't dial his wife. He dialed a secure, direct 11-digit number burned into his memory. The phone rang exactly twice. "General Reed's office, Major Vance speaking," a crisp voice answered. "Major, this is Colonel Noah Henderson. Put the general on." There was a half-second pause as the major recognized the voice of one of the most respected logisticians in the armed forces. "Right away, sir." A click. Then a deep, booming voice came on the line. "Noah, I thought you were enjoying your leave painting your living room or polishing that damn car. What do you need?" Lieutenant General Thomas Reed was a 3-star commander who oversaw regional defense logistics. He was also Noah's mentor, a man known in the Pentagon for a temper that could melt steel, and a protective loyalty toward his officers that bordered on ferocious. "Tom Thepter," Noah said calmly, his eyes locked dead onto Treadwell's smirking face. "I've encountered a rather severe logistical delay in the town of Oak Ridge." "A delay car breakdown." "Negative. I am currently handcuffed and being detained at the Oak Ridge Police Department." Noah stated his tone as casual as if he were reporting a delay in a supply shipment. The line went dead silent. The silence was heavier than an explosion. When General Reed finally spoke, the warmth had vanished completely. His voice was a sub-zero whisper. "Are you injured, Colonel?" "Minor laceration to the head. Handcuffs were applied improperly. But mostly, General, it's the paint on my Mustang. The arresting officer used it as a leaning post." "I see," Reed said. "Who is the officer?" Noah didn't break eye contact with Treadwell. "Officer Gary Treadwell, badge number 4417. "Hold the line, Noah." Noah stood in the booking area holding the receiver. Treadwell crossed his arms, mocking him. "Who'd you call your mummy? You crying to the fake military police?" 2 minutes passed. In the background of the squad room, the chief of police's door suddenly burst open. Chief Robert Lawson, a politician in a uniform who usually didn't leave his office before lunch, came sprinting out. His face was ashen, his tie askew. He had a cell phone pressed to his ear, and he looked terrified. "Where is he?" Lawson bellowed, his voice cracking. "Where is Henderson?" The entire squad room froze. Treadwell looked at the chief, his smug smile faltering for the first time. Chief Lawson's eyes locked onto Noah, standing by the wall, bruised, bleeding, and in handcuffs. Lawson dropped his phone. It shattered on the linoleum floor. "Treadwell," Lawson whispered, the horror dawning on him as he looked at his officer. "What have you done?" Noah lifted the receiver back to his ear. "General, the mayor is online. To the local FBI field office is scrambling a civil rights team, and I am sending a pair of JAG lawyers and 2 military police cruisers from the base to your location right now." General Reed said the gears of the federal government, whining as they spun up to maximum speed. "Sit tight, Noah. We are going to dismantle this." Noah hung up the phone. He looked at Treadwell, who was now staring at the chief's panicked face, the first drops of cold sweat breaking out on the back of his neck. "You should have looked at the ID, Gary," Noah said quietly. The squad room of the Oak Ridge Police Department had transformed into a vacuum. The chaotic hum of ringing phones, clacking keyboards, and officers bantering over bad coffee had instantly evaporated, replaced by a suffocating, terrifying silence. Chief Robert Lawson stood frozen in the center of the room, his chest heaving. He looked at Colonel Noah Henderson, whose wrists were still bound tightly behind his back, a thin line of dried blood tracing a path from his hairline down to his jaw. Then Lawson turned his gaze to Officer Gary Treadwell. The look in the chief's eyes was not anger. It was pure, unadulterated panic. "Get the cuffs off him," Lawson rasped his voice, trembling so violently he had to clear his throat and scream it a second time. "Get the goddamn cuffs off him right now." Treadwell didn't move. The arrogant sneer had melted off his face, leaving behind a slack-jawed mask of disbelief. He looked down at the keys hanging from his duty belt, but his hands felt heavy, detached from his brain. He couldn't process the tectonic shift in power that had just occurred. A minute ago, he was the apex predator of his suburban beat. Now he was staring down the barrel of the United States federal government. "Chief," he resisted. Treadwell stammered the word, sounding hollow and pathetic, even to his own ears. He refused a lawful, "Shut your mouth." Lawson roared, practically lunging across the room. He shoved Treadwell backward, snatched the keys from the officer's belt, and hurried over to Noah. Lawson's hands shook as he fumbled with the tiny keyhole on the handcuffs. "Colonel Henderson, sir, I cannot begin to express how deeply sorry I am. This is a catastrophic misunderstanding, an isolated incident." The heavy metal cuffs clicked and sprang open. Noah brought his arms forward slowly. His wrists were bruised purple, the skin broken, and weeping where the steel had bitten into him. He didn't rub them. He didn't curse. He simply reached into his pocket, pulled out a pristine white linen handkerchief, and carefully dabbed the blood from his forehead. "It was not a misunderstanding, Chief Lawson," Noah said, his voice terrifyingly calm. "It was a targeted, unlawful detention, accompanied by excessive force and destruction of private property. And if this is how your officers treat a senior military commander, I shudder to think how they treat the civilians in this jurisdiction." Lawson swallowed hard, sweat beading on his upper lip. "Sir, we will handle this internally. Immediately. Officer Treadwell will be disciplined." "You are no longer handling this internally," Noah replied, folding the bloody handkerchief and placing it back in his pocket. Outside the brick station, the deep, guttural roar of heavy diesel engines shattered the suburban quiet. Through the front glass doors of the precinct, rookie Kevin Miller watched his eyes wide with horror as 2 matte black, up-armored military police SUVs jumped the curb and parked diagonally across the front entrance, completely blocking the police station's driveway. Before the vehicles had even come to a complete stop, the doors flew open. 4 military police officers stepped out. They were giants clad in full tactical gear, Kevlar vests and sidearms, moving with a synchronized, terrifying precision that made the local Oak Ridge cops look like mall security. Behind them, a sleek, black government sedan pulled up. A woman stepped out. She wore the sharp, immaculate Class A uniform of a United States Air Force captain, carrying a thick leather briefcase. The front doors of the station swung open, and the 4 MPs entered in a diamond formation, their heavy combat boots thudding against the linoleum floor. The Oak Ridge officers instinctively stepped back, giving them a wide berth. The MPs didn't draw their weapons, but they didn't need to. The sheer kinetic threat of their presence paralyzed the room. They flanked Noah, forming a protective perimeter around him. Captain Sarah Mitchell, a JAG prosecutor with a reputation for merciless litigation, walked straight past Chief Lawson without giving him a glance. She stopped in front of Noah and rendered a razor-sharp salute. "Colonel Henderson," Mitchell said, her voice crisp and commanding. "General Reed sends his regards. Are you requiring immediate medical evacuation, sir?" "That won't be necessary, Captain." Noah returned the salute. "Though I will require photographs of my injuries and a medical assessment for the official record before we leave." Mitchell turned her head slowly, her cold eyes sweeping the room until they locked onto Chief Lawson. "Chief, I am Captain Mitchell Judge, Advocate General's Corps. I am taking custody of Colonel Henderson. I require the immediate release of his personal effects, his vehicle, and the badge numbers of every officer involved in his detention." "Captain, please, we can sort this out without escalating," Lawson began, holding up his hands defensively. "The escalation occurred when your officer assaulted a commanding officer of the United States Armed Forces." Mitchell cut him off her tone, leaving zero room for negotiation. She snapped her briefcase open on the booking desk. "You have 2 choices, Chief. You hand over his effects and the requested information right now, or I make a phone call and the FBI field office in the city will be here in 20 minutes with federal warrants to strip this building down to the copper wiring." Sergeant Harrison didn't wait for the chief to answer. He shoved the plastic evidence bag containing Noah's wallet keys and IDs across the counter. "Badge number 4417, Officer Gary Treadwell, and badge 5102, Officer Kevin Miller. They were the arresting unit." Mitchell jotted the numbers down on a legal pad. She handed the bag to Noah. "Let's go, Colonel," Mitchell said, as the military escort moved toward the door. Noah stopped. He turned and looked directly at Treadwell, who had retreated to the back corner of the room, looking pale and nauseous. "Officer Treadwell," Noah called out. The entire room held its breath. "I told you that you were making a spectacle. I hope you're prepared for the audience." With that, Noah walked out the doors, flanked by the MPs, leaving the Oak Ridge Police Department suffocating in his wake. While the military extraction was taking place inside the station, a different kind of bomb was detonating in cyberspace. Across town, Sarah Jenkins was sitting in the back office of her bakery. Her hands were still shaking slightly from the adrenaline of witnessing the violent arrest on the street. She had watched the cruiser drive away. The image of the dignified black man's head hitting the doorframe burned into her mind. Sarah opened her laptop, pulled the video file from her phone, and watched it back. It was damning. The audio was crystal clear. She could hear Noah's calm, measured voice. She could hear Treadwell's aggressive, unhinged screaming. She could hear the sickening thud of Noah's head hitting the metal, and she could hear Treadwell explicitly threaten her for recording. She didn't know who the man was, but she knew an injustice when she saw one. At 10:14 a.m., Sarah uploaded the video to 3 major social media platforms. She kept the caption simple and factual. An innocent man was just assaulted and arrested for absolutely nothing in Oak Ridge. The officer threatened me for filming. This needs to be seen. Hashtag Oak Ridge PD. Hashtag police brutality. Hashtag accountability. For the first 10 minutes, the video sat quietly garnering a few dozen views from her friends and local followers. At 10:27 a.m., a prominent civil rights lawyer in Chicago with 2 million followers stumbled upon the video. He retweeted it with a single word: infuriating. By 10:45 a.m., the algorithm caught the surging engagement. The video hit the trending page. By 11:15 a.m., as Noah was sitting in the back of the armored SUV, having his injuries photographed by an army medic, the video crossed 1 million views. The comment section was a tidal wave of outrage. Internet sleuths went to work immediately. Within 30 minutes, they had identified the location from the bakery storefront in the background. 10 minutes after that, they identified the cruiser number 42. And by noon, someone had taken a high-resolution screenshot of the video zoomed in on the ID cards scattered on the hood of the Mustang, and recognized the distinct layout of a Department of Defense Common Access card. The narrative shifted from a standard police brutality outrage to something entirely unprecedented. The internet realized the local cop hadn't just assaulted a civilian. He had assaulted a high-ranking military officer. The switchboard at the Oak Ridge Police Department began to light up at 12:05 p.m. By 12:10 p.m., the system crashed under the weight of thousands of simultaneous calls pouring in from all 50 states. Inside his office, Chief Lawson was pouring himself his third glass of antacid when his private cell phone rang. The caller ID displayed Mayor Harding. Lawson closed his eyes, took a deep breath, and answered. "Mr. Mayor." "Robert Mayor Thomas Harding," said. His voice was dangerously quiet, lacking its usual political booming quality. "I am currently looking out the window of City Hall. There are 3 local news vans parking on the lawn. My press secretary just informed me that CNN and Fox News have both requested comments regarding a viral video of one of your officers assaulting a black Air Force colonel. Sir, we are handling it. It was a rogue officer. Are you out of your mind?" The mayor exploded, the volume suddenly deafening. "Handling it. The Pentagon just called the governor's office. The governor just called me. We are international news. Robert, who is the officer? Gary Treadwell." Lawson admitted, rubbing his temples. "I want his badge. I want his gun. I want his locker cleared out before the hour is up," the mayor ordered. "Suspend him without pay, pending termination. The union will fight a termination before an investigation. Let them try. He is a liability. You cut him loose right now, or I'm coming down there and taking your badge along with his. Do you understand me?" "Yes, Mr. Mayor." Lawson hung up the phone. He walked out of his office into the squad room. The atmosphere was poisonous. Officers were staring at their phones, watching the video of their colleague, realizing the radioactive fallout was going to contaminate the entire department. Treadwell was sitting at his desk, staring blankly at a blank incident report form. He looked up as the chief approached. "Chief." Treadwell started trying to muster some of his old bravado. "I'm calling my union rep. We need to get ahead of this. That guy was insubordinate. He—" "Stand up, Gary." Lawson commanded, his voice cold and loud enough for everyone to hear. Treadwell hesitated, then stood. "Hand over your weapon, your badge, and your precinct keycard." Treadwell's face flushed red. "You can't do this. I have union protection. I have qualified immunity. You have to conduct an internal affairs investigation before you strip me. Qualified immunity covers officers acting within the scope of their lawful duties," Lawson said, stepping into Treadwell's personal space. "You initiated an unlawful traffic stop, fabricated a traffic violation, assaulted an active duty military commander, and illegally detained him. The union president just called me 5 minutes ago. He watched the video. "They aren't backing you, Gary. You're on your own." The color drained entirely from Treadwell's face. He looked around the room, making eye contact with the other officers. Men and women he had worked with for 8 years immediately looked away, severing ties with him in real time. Even rookie Miller wouldn't meet his gaze. With shaking hands, Treadwell unclipped his holster, placing his heavy service weapon on the desk. He unpinned the silver shield from his chest, the metal suddenly feeling like a burning coal, and set it next to the gun. "Clear out your locker and leave through the back door," Lawson said, turning his back on the disgraced officer. "If you set foot on this property again, I'll have you arrested for trespassing." By 3 p.m., the Oak Ridge Police Department was no longer under local control. 2 unmarked black Suburbans with government plates had pulled into the back lot. 4 agents from the FBI's Civil Rights Division, wearing tailored suits and carrying heavy lockboxes, had commandeered the chief's conference room. The Department of Justice had moved with unprecedented speed, fueled by the viral outrage and immense pressure from the Pentagon. Gary Treadwell hadn't even made it home. He had been intercepted in the parking lot by 2 state troopers and escorted back inside, not as an officer, but as a suspect in a federal civil rights investigation. He sat in the sterile, windowless interrogation room, sweating profusely through his civilian t-shirt. Across from him sat his union representative Tom Higgins, an older man who looked like he had aged 10 years in the last 3 hours. Higgins had initially shown up to fight for a suspended cop, but after seeing the federal agents, his posture had shifted from defensive to damage control. The metal door clicked open. Special Agent Richard Reynolds walked in, carrying a thick manila folder and a sleek silver laptop. He didn't offer a handshake. He sat down, opened the folder, and hit the record button on a digital audio device resting in the center of the table. "Gary Treadwell," Reynolds began, his voice devoid of emotion. "You are currently under investigation for deprivation of rights under color of law, a violation of Title 18, U.S.C., Section 242. You are also being investigated for false arrest, aggravated assault and destruction of private property." Treadwell swallowed hard. "I want to invoke my right to remain silent. I want a lawyer." "You are entitled to a lawyer, and Mr. Higgins here has already contacted one on your behalf," Reynolds said smoothly. "However, you are not under arrest at this exact second. We are simply conducting a fact-finding interview. But before you decide to stay silent, I think you should see what we've found." Reynolds turned the laptop around so it faced Treadwell. He hit play. It wasn't Sarah Jenkins's cell phone video. It was a high-definition, wide-angle shot looking out over the hood of a black 1968 Mustang. The dashcam footage. The video showed the Mustang approaching the intersection of Maple and Elmwood. The car slowed down. The speedometer overlay in the bottom corner of the video dropped from 23 miles per hour down to exactly 0 miles per hour. The car sat motionless at the stop sign for a full 3 seconds. The cross-traffic was clear. The car then proceeded forward smoothly. 10 seconds later, the red and blue flashing lights of Cruiser 42 illuminated the rearview camera feed. Reynolds paused the video. He looked at Treadwell. "Your incident report, which you partially filled out before being suspended, states that you initiated the traffic stop because the driver failed to come to a complete stop. This footage extracted directly from Colonel Henderson's vehicle by federal technicians an hour ago proves that is a lie." Treadwell's mouth went dry. From my angle, it looked like a rolling stop." "We pulled the GPS telemetry from your cruiser, Gary," Reynolds countered without missing a beat. "You were parked 2 blocks away, facing the opposite direction. You couldn't even see the intersection. You initiated the stop because you saw a black man driving an expensive car in a wealthy neighborhood. You profiled him." "That's a lie. I didn't know who was driving until I walked up to the window." Treadwell shouted desperation, creeping into his voice. We also pulled your cruiser's internal dashcam audio, Reynolds said, tapping a key on the laptop. The tinny audio from the police cruiser filled the room. Treadwell's voice. Look at this. Classic muscle car in this neighborhood. Driver doesn't look local. Miller's voice. He wasn't speeding, he looked like he was cruising. Treadwell's voice. He rolled that stop sign back there. Miller's voice. I didn't see him roll it. Treadwell's voice. You need to pay better attention, rookie. Reynolds stopped the audio. Your own rookie questioned your pretext before you even turned on the lights. Officer Miller is currently in the next room, giving a fully sworn statement to my partner, confirming that you fabricated the probable cause for the stop. Treadwell slumped back in his chair, the air rushing out of his lungs. The walls were closing in, thick and fast. But that's just the beginning. Reynolds continued opening the manila folder and sliding 3 glossy 8x10 photographs across the table. The first photograph was a close-up of the deep, jagged scratch gouged into the custom black paint of the Mustang's roof. The second was a medical photo of Noah's wrists, swollen, bruised, and bleeding from the over-tightened handcuffs. The third was a photo of Noah's forehead, the laceration deep enough to require butterfly stitches, surrounded by a swelling contusion. Colonel Henderson is a decorated logistics commander. His hands are his livelihood. You caused severe tissue damage to his wrists. You permanently damaged a classic vehicle valued at over $120,000. And you caused a head injury to a federal officer. Reynolds leaned forward, resting his elbows on the table, his eyes drilling into Treadwell's soul. You thought you were humiliating a civilian to make yourself feel big. Instead, you assaulted a man who possesses a top-secret security clearance, who advises the Pentagon on global troop movements. Do you understand the magnitude of the mistake you made this morning? Higgins, the Union rep, put a hand on Treadwell's shoulder. Gary, don't say another word. We're done here. Yeah, you are, Reynolds agreed, standing up and closing the laptop. The Department of Justice is fast-tracking a grand jury indictment. The Air Force is exploring options to charge you under federal statutes regarding the assault of military personnel. And the civil suit Colonel Henderson's legal team is drafting will ensure you spend the rest of your natural life in bankruptcy court. Reynolds walked to the door, pausing with his hand on the knob. Your career isn't just over, Gary. Your life, as you know it, ended the second you pulled that man out of his car. By 6 p.m., the sun was beginning to set over Oak Ridge, casting long, somber shadows across the precinct parking lot. Gary Treadwell walked out the back door, carrying a small cardboard box containing a coffee mug, a few pens, and a framed photo of his dog. He wore civilian clothes, his head down, trying to avoid the gaze of the state troopers guarding the entrance. He walked toward his personal truck, alone. His phone hadn't rung once in the last 4 hours. His colleagues had abandoned him. His union had distanced itself. His city had fired him. He climbed into the driver's seat, the silence of the cab suffocating him. He turned the key, the engine sputtering to life. As he pulled out of the parking lot, he glanced in the rearview mirror. He didn't see the proud, authoritative cop he had imagined himself to be that morning. He saw a broken, terrified man who had thrown his entire life away because he couldn't control his own arrogance. The digital wildfire was still raging online, his face plastered across national news networks, forever immortalized as the bully who picked a fight with a giant. By nightfall, Gary Treadwell was officially a ghost in the law enforcement community, waiting for the federal handcuffs to inevitably replace the ones he had so eagerly slapped onto Noah Henderson. 8 months later, a biting March wind whipped through the streets of downtown Chicago, rattling the windows of the Everett McKinley Dirksen United States Courthouse. Inside courtroom 14B, the atmosphere was as cold and heavy as the marble floors. Gary Treadwell sat at the defense table. The arrogant, swaggering patrolman who had strutted down Elmwood Avenue was entirely gone, replaced by a hollowed-out shell of a man. He had lost 20 pounds. His hair had thinned and greyed prematurely. Instead of a pressed navy uniform, adorned with a silver badge, he wore a shapeless, oversized orange jumpsuit issued by the Metropolitan Correctional Center. To his right sat his defense attorney, Jonathan Hayes, a tired-looking public defender who had been assigned the impossible task of mitigating a national scandal. To his left sat United States Attorney Amanda Croft, organizing her meticulous, devastating files. The twists of the past 8 months had captivated the nation. The Department of Justice had not simply stopped at Treadwell. When federal agents began tearing into Treadwell's cruiser computer and personal files, Treadwell realized he was staring down the barrel of a 20-year maximum sentence for federal civil rights violations. Desperate, terrified, and eager to save himself, Treadwell made a move nobody saw coming. He turned state's witness against his own department. The predator became the informant. Treadwell handed the FBI a hidden encrypted hard drive he had kept as an insurance policy. The drive contained hundreds of internal precinct emails, unlogged dispatch audio, and secretly recorded locker room conversations. It explicitly outlined a covert enforcement zone policy orchestrated by none other than Chief Robert Lawson. The data proved that Lawson had directed his officers to artificially inflate traffic stops on Black and Hispanic motorists passing through Oak Ridge to fund the town's municipal budget through exorbitant citations. The revelation was a tactical nuke. 3 weeks before this sentencing hearing, the FBI had raided Chief Lawson's home at dawn, dragging him out in handcuffs on federal racketeering and civil rights conspiracy charges. The entire Oak Ridge Police Department had been placed under a strict federal consent decree, its leadership gutted, and its remaining officers forced to undergo intense federal oversight. But today was about the man who lit the match. "All rise," the bailiff called out, as Judge Thomas Barrett, a no-nonsense jurist with a reputation for merciless sentences in corruption cases, took the bench. "Be seated." Judge Barrett ordered, his gaze immediately fixing on Treadwell. "We are here for the sentencing of Gary Treadwell. Before I render my decision, the court will hear a victim impact statement." From the heavy wooden doors at the back of the courtroom, Colonel Noah Henderson walked in. The silence in the room was absolute. Noah was not wearing a comfortable polo shirt today. He was dressed in his full United States Air Force dress blues. The silver eagles on his shoulders gleamed under the fluorescent lights. The rows of colorful ribbons on his chest told a silent story of decades of honorable, selfless service in theaters of war around the globe. His posture was as always immaculate. He walked past Treadwell without so much as a glance, stepping up to the wooden podium. He adjusted the microphone. "Your Honor," Noah began, his deep, resonant voice filling the cavernous room. "8 months ago, I was pulled from my vehicle, physically assaulted, and unlawfully stripped of my freedom. The physical injuries healed. The paint on my vehicle was repaired. But the scar that day, left behind, is not one I carry for myself." Noah finally turned his head, his piercing gaze locking onto Treadwell. Treadwell couldn't maintain eye contact. He stared down at his shackled hands, his chest trembling. "I have commanded thousands of troops," Noah continued. "I have sent men and women into hostile territory, trusting them to wield lethal force with honor, discipline, and absolute restraint. The defendant possessed a badge and a gun, yet he possessed none of those virtues. He operated under the assumption that his authority was absolute and that my dignity was irrelevant. But I stand here today not seeking vengeance for Colonel Henderson. I am speaking for the civilian who doesn't have a Department of Defense identification card in their pocket to act as a shield. I am speaking for the young man who doesn't know how to de-escalate an armed, fragile ego. If this defendant was willing to do this to a senior military officer in broad daylight, it is terrifying to consider what he has done to those who had no voice. Noah turned back to the judge. Your Honor, I ask that the sentence reflects not the damage he did to my wrists, but the damage he did to the public trust. Noah stepped down from the podium, his footsteps echoing like a slow drumbeat as he returned to the gallery. Judge Barrett adjusted his glasses. He looked down at his paperwork, then back up at the broken man in the orange jumpsuit. Mr. Treadwell. Barrett said, his voice laced with pure contempt. Your cooperation in exposing the systemic corruption within the Oak Ridge Police Department is the only reason you are not spending the next 2 decades behind bars. However, a badge is a sacred covenant with the public. You weaponized it to feed your own prejudice and vanity. You are a disgrace to the men and women in law enforcement who actually uphold their oaths. Judge Barrett picked up his wooden gavel. Gary Treadwell, I sentence you to 72 months in a federal penitentiary, to be followed by 3 years of supervised release. You are forever barred from holding any position of public trust security or law enforcement. Bail is revoked. The defendant is remanded to the custody of the United States Marshals. Bang! The gavel cracked like a gunshot. 2 massive U.S. Marshals immediately stepped up behind Treadwell. Stand up, the taller Marshal ordered. Treadwell stood, his legs shaking so violently he almost collapsed. The Marshal grabbed Treadwell's left arm, wrenching it behind his back, followed by his right. The loud metallic click-click of the heavy federal handcuffs echoing in the courtroom was the exact sound Treadwell had inflicted on Noah 8 months prior. Let's go, the Marshal grunted, shoving Treadwell toward the side door leading to the holding cells. Treadwell glanced over his shoulder, one last time, tears finally spilling down his cheeks, realizing the nightmare was no longer a threat. It was his new, permanent reality. Outside the courthouse, the sun broke through the gray Chicago clouds. Noah Henderson walked down the wide granite steps, the crisp wind tugging at his dress uniform. A few feet away, parked legally in the loading zone, sat his immaculate, fully restored 1968 black Ford Mustang. The roof was flawless, the custom paint gleaming like dark glass. Noah unlocked the door, slid into the driver's seat, and turned the key. The massive V8 engine roared to life, a deep, powerful rumble that vibrated in his chest. He pulled the gearshift into drive and smoothly merged into the bustling city traffic, leaving the ruined life of Gary Treadwell entirely in his rearview mirror. True power doesn't need to shout, and unchecked arrogance always has an expiration date. Colonel Henderson's quiet dignity didn't just expose a single bad cop, it dismantled an entire corrupt system, proving that justice comes for those who abuse their authority. Did this incredible story of accountability, resilience, and sweet karma make your blood boil and cheer for the right side? If you loved this deep dive into real-life drama, hit that like button to let the algorithm know. Share this video with someone who loves a perfect justice story, and make sure to subscribe and ring the bell so you never miss our next explosive true tale. Stay sharp and stay safe out there.